So we're thinking of a spatial way to represent the relationship. The client is interacting with who? The agency, right? So maybe the line should go, let's make the line going from the client to the agency, right? Yeah. This is often how, I mean, these meetings, you'll get a request from a client and be on the account side getting kind of direction and what they want to see in terms of specifics. A lot of times meetings, you come together, it's like, nobody in the room knows what we're going to do at this point. Let's talk through it, write some stuff on a board and see what happens and go from there. And so let's do the line from the client to the agency. What does the line represent? The connection, right? Yeah, so let's connect it. Okay, so we have the representation of the agency. Somehow we need to be able to show the parts within it, though. The client's interacting with the agency, right? But is that where the interaction stops? Let's call them departments. So, okay, so if we're talking about branches here then, if you're thinking about the roles of those parts of an agency, are these one-way communications? Like, does the account side only talk to the design side? No. Does the production side only talk to management? No. So we need to figure out, if you can figure out a way to do that with a tree, I'd be curious to see that. But maybe there's another way we can show it to show the multiple levels of interaction. Let's go with that. Make it a flower head. Let's do that. I like that. Yeah, because we need to be able to remember, this is a really boring software company they just want to be able to show visually the spatial relationship within a large organization like an agency. Okay, so the 4 petals, what do they represent? For a lot of departments, you can teach someone to be a good project manager. You can teach someone to be a good manager. You can teach somebody the ins and outs of production. What's harder to teach somebody is the creative aspect of designing and coming up with something and the ability to execute. So, while the starting entry point for many designers does feel like you're in the basement, some of the most highly sought after talent and best ability in terms of an asset to an agency are your creative directors with lots that are extremely creative, have good visions for things, and are able to execute. That's something you can't really teach. In terms of the intellectual, being an intellectual asset to an organization, it's hard to be a good designer. Okay, so we have our departments, right? So how do they interact? And we've used a line. Should we make the line more specific to talk about how interaction happens? Does their interaction happen more, or like, does it just go one way? Both ways, right?
All ways.
Well, so is the client only dictating to the agency?
No.
We're only talking to the agency. There we go. Yes, exactly. Arrows. All right. So we have a two-way communication between the agency and the client. What about within the agency? If somebody said this is for an ad or it's going to be posted online for a spatial representation, what might be a misconception about that? So that's a good representation that everybody needs to communicate. But how can we show interaction between each part of the agency? This is what's called design by committee, which makes this some interesting problems when you get to a project. It looks like a heart with a dollar sign with arrows pointing to a flower head. All the petals represent a part of the agency department, or it's a different agency department. Okay, so we've shown the interaction between each department, because it's a two-way street when you get within the agency, right? Management talks to who? Everybody. Production talks to who? Design team talks to who? Right? Yeah, you should be getting the idea by now. The account side talks to who? What's the difference, though, between the account side and the other departments? They talk to the client as well. Okay. I also like this because y'all did a way more creative job than what I was going to show you. I thought we'd have fun. So this is more of an account, like, nuts and bolts version of the idea. Right, so client, account, management, production, design. Yours is much prettier than this. But let's think about when you get a project, what this looks like. So we have the client. They're requesting this image that we just created, right? But when they're first requesting it, who are they talking to? The account side, exactly. They're going to give them information like this is the main goal, right? We need an image that shows a spatial relationship within organizations like an agency, right? they might say, if it's going to be in an ad, it needs to be able to fit on an 8.5 by 11 ad, or these are some of the certain, they'll give the mandates and the specifics for what's required for that project. So it comes in, goes to the account team. In an agency, generally what's going to happen, and there's caveats to any of this because every agency is a little different, but generally it's going to go to the production. Account's going to talk to production because production does what? They make things work efficiently, and that means they're passing it along. So your production person is then going to assign a designer or a design team to that project, right? Management here, unless it's a big project or a really big client that is crucial, or they just want to be involved, which sometimes happens, they're generally just going to check in with the team occasionally. They probably won't be too involved unless it's maybe the creative director of the, say, like the creative department. So goes to production, gets routed to a design team or to designer. That's gonna, if it's a simple request, something that shouldn't involve a lot of hours in time, that the designer might make something real quick, goes to account. If they have some edits, goes back to designer. You get the idea. Back to account, over to client. If it's something that is a little more involved, you might have a meeting between the account side, the design team that was assigned the project, along with the production team. Those are generally going to be your biggest projects. So you get this loop that you pretty much go in. And depending on the rounds of edits, if something goes over to client and they have edits or changes, it goes through the exact same process. You're going to have this continuous loop. But that leads to some interesting challenges. Based off of what you're looking at right here, what do you foresee being a problem occasionally within agencies? Efficiency, yes. Why? Kind of the equivalent of playing the telephone game with better technology. And what are some other issues you might run into? You're assuming everybody on the team is understanding maybe the job that was put forward, is understanding the medium or the vehicle that, you know, hopefully a production person wouldn't give a digital project to somebody who only does print, but if they don't understand digital, right, that'll be a problem. What's another issue you might have here? You generally, and I don't want to stereotype or overgeneralize, but account side tends to have a different mindset or perspective than the design side, right? That can lead to different ways of thinking about things, how they might approach a project. Not necessarily a bad thing. The more perspectives you get in that class, maybe, or in that project, the better. But can lead to some conflicts, possibly. Knowing the client. Something as stupid as, my client doesn't like rounded edges. I know that from years of working with them, that if I send someone with rounded edges, it's coming back. Time management. One, you have to assume everybody's good at managing their time. That can be a problem. Two, what if there's a mistake? It's not just one person that has to rectify the mistake, right? There could be multiple different people that have to be told, and that has to be fixed and go through the loop again. So a mistake can cost quite a bit of money, especially if it's a big project. Any other thoughts here? In management, sometimes we'll get involved in projects that slows things down and costs a lot more money than if you're an account side and you're in charge of the budget, drives you absolutely nuts because you don't necessarily need them at that meeting, but they want to be there. What else could be an issue? Generally, the account side is going to be very territorial when it comes to a client. Almost absurdly so. If the client, maybe they're friends with the designer and that's how they learned about the agency, if they go directly to a designer, well, first of all, that's messing up the process within the agency because the designer, since their primary job isn't talking to the client necessarily, and often in some agencies, unless you're a creative director, you don't talk to the client, ever. You don't even really go to meetings, it's passed on to you. That can lead to some interesting turf issues within an agency. So I purposely belabored that point to show you that this can be a mess if it's inefficient, right? Think of it as a machine. If each department isn't functioning efficiently, it can mess up the entire process. Let's zero in on these two right here. Account and design. What are some of the problems you might have when it comes to communication and interaction between those two? Your specialties are different. generally your skills are going to be different. Sometimes it's a different personality type when it comes to designers in the account side, and that can lead to some friction. The account side is generally where your writers are going to be. Unless you're a larger agency, your writers might be a separate department, but you need quite a bit of work to support writers as a solo job. So your account side is going to be doing the writing and content creation in terms of that. Sometimes, not always, designers will do some of that. You have two areas of content creation, but very different areas of content creation. Trade show. Your client's going to a trade show. Account team gets the order. Production is going to talk to the client's trade show vendor, generally, get the deadline, get production specs, the nuts and bolts of what that project entails. Design team is going to design the structure, it'll get approved by the client through the account side, and then files will be sent to the vendor, the output house, by production, generally. So again, a lot of people touching it. So what are some other issues between these two? Designers generally have a reason for doing what they're doing, right? It can be challenging because if you have an account person that can't take what you told them and turn it into something that they can tell the client, yeah, that leads to problems, absolutely. There's going to be a project management software that each agency uses that generally allows for uploads of files, generally some sort of chat feature, and allows everybody to stay up to date on where a project is within this process, absolutely. There's no replacement for good communication among people in this process. You can't replace that, absolutely. Because then, say that it takes a while to get back anything from the client. You've moved on, it was 2 weeks ago. I mean, you don't remember a lot of what happened 2 weeks. That's a lot of time. So, yeah, you can't replace communication between individuals. So let's talk, and this is coming from the account side, but let's talk about a potential issue between communication here. An ad. Client wants an ad. Comes here, goes to production, right? They give it to a design team, teams meet. Design team creates the ad. It's great. Looks great, copy's perfect. Goes to the account side, they give the okay. Goes here. There's a typo. Nobody noticed it. How could that be a problem? So there's a bunch of different layers to this, right? Who gets the call? The account gets the call. Generally, those calls are not fun, right? It kind of depends on your client. Most don't yell at you, but some will, right? So how does the account person feel then? Well, and who else? So all groups proved it. A good account person will realize anything that they send over to a client is ultimately their responsibility, right? It's what they're showing their responsibility. But who else is part of the fault here? So if, design asks production, please prove this, they find an issue, goes right back to design, they fix it. Generally, you're going to route something. Depending on the agency, it can be old school, like they will literally give you a folder with the different revisions in it, and it might be, proof this. You read through it, sign your name, hand it to the next person on the list. Everybody should sign off. Now, while it might be, and a responsible account person might realize anything they send is their responsibility, think of something where a typo maybe isn't a good example, right? You should be able to read it and see the typo. You should have read it multiple times over multiple different days so your eyes were fresh. What if it was a trade show booth that was going to be output and the designer forgot to make any type outlined? Or forgot to group a logo that had multiple pieces and some of the pieces got messed up. But when you're proofing it, when you're proofing a trade show that the actual wall might be like 30 feet long, 10 feet high, right? So the account, and you're looking at this on your, maybe a double screen computer, but the account side is reading the text. They're not looking, basically, it'd be an easy thing to miss, right? Because you're looking at maybe a PDF screen where you're zoomed in. I mean, this is a giant file. So it'd be hard to see something. It might be itty bitty, but it prints, goes print, and it goes to the trade show with that on there. client is not going to be happy. One, because maybe you messed up a logo. Two, it might have cost them, a few $100,000 to print the trade show booth, right? Account person will understand anything they send over is their problem, or is their responsibility. But who ultimately should have caught that? There are different challenges to each part of an agency. That's where putting your best foot forward is going to be extremely important, because when the account side gets the call, and it's something that maybe they couldn't have noticed or it would have been very difficult to see, that leads to what? Possibly losing an account. Hopefully it's not that nice, or just, trust. Like that account person isn't going to trust maybe what that designer puts out in the future. You not only do you lose trust with maybe a designer or with an account person or a production person, client loses trust in the agency. It's your responsibility to make sure whatever you're creating is correct and built to specs and done well. Client, if there's something wrong that goes to client and it's been printed, client first of all doesn't want to pay for that job because you screwed up. But if it's also been printed and they need to reprint it, guess who could pay for that original printing? Agency. So when you're talking about a mistake, it's not just necessarily a mistake where it's like, oh, well, better luck next time. We'll get them next time, right? It's like, no, agency's paying for that. They're not going to be happy if they're paying for a booth that has a mistake with a logo, right? So an agency is difficult because it tends to be a business that has a lot of flux in it. That goes everything from just the economy. Marketing is the first to go, last to come back for a lot of businesses, which means that hurts the agency's income. But generally what you're seeing is a lot, and this is one of the reasons we're a small agency right now, is we have a lot of partners that we keep on hand, that we partner with depending on the project. So we can bring in expertise and other people when we have the work, but don't have to carry that overhead, which you're seeing a lot of people go to because it's hard to be a big agency, especially, think about the last 12 years, with the economy and stuff like that. Those margins are tight. When you lose a client, you're not necessarily just talking about, oh, we lost a client. You're talking about, well, who's going to be here next week? Because who can we afford to pay their salary, basically? But the point of it is, it's important, one, that you're aware of the different aspects of the communication within an agency. Two, that there are unique challenges to each part within an agency. If one part isn't functioning, if you have an account person that shouldn't be doing account work, everybody else suffers, client suffers, same with the designer, same with production, and management too. And so I wanted to give some advice that you could pretty much take with you moving forward. Whether you're going to be a freelancer or work within a client, you be on the client side maybe, or in an agency setting. Give you some tips and pointers. We've touched on a lot of this, right? But these are things that'll help when you're communicating. So number one, communication. It's a living process. When you start working with somebody, you're kind of learning the ins and outs of how they best receive information and how they give you information, right? If something isn't working, bring it up, be direct about it. Don't be a jerk. Like, I don't understand anything you're telling me. But, if it's something on on a work order or a request, be direct and tell them exactly how you would best receive that information or what you might need in order to execute that project to your best ability. Yes, sometimes that means you give them a bad news sandwich, right? Which start with good news. Hey, I love the copy you sent over. Then you slip in can you send it in a different format next time though? For whatever reason, they send it over in some weird software that you have trouble opening or messes up all the characters, right? And then you say, add another compliment at the end. The bad news sandwich will get you through a lot of things. Two, designers face a lot of criticism, probably more than anybody in the agency. Mainly because you're actually outputting something. And there is an element of, since it is your creativity, you're putting a little bit of yourself out there, right? And that can be painful when somebody has edits or maybe doesn't like it, or is a little heavy-handed in how they deliver criticism. Some people are just very bad at it. And it can be painful. But at the end of the day, you're going to get it, one way or another. Roll with the punches. Thick skin is good. You'll learn more from learning or getting that criticism in the long run. So view it as a painful but somewhat necessary aspect of your job. Some of the best people I've worked with have started out, mailroom or utility designer at a large place and have worked their way up to like creative director status. It was hard every single step, and they were at a lower level than anybody else, but they learned to take that criticism effectively and turn it into something they can actually apply in the future. So next time you're getting edits, changes on something that you thought was great the way it was, take what you can from it and learn from it. When you're in an agency setting and with a client, sometimes, well actually no, the client gets what they want if they're paying the bills for the most part, unless it's some crazy request that makes absolutely no sense. That would be management's job to tell them, no, we're not doing that. But you're going to have to make changes you don't necessarily agree with. Ask questions. A lot of questions. One of the biggest challenges I've seen for young designers is a reticence to ask questions. Anything from, I don't understand what you just told me or what the goal of this project is, to, I don't know, there's something about the software I don't understand, to wanting ongoing education but not asking for it. If you have a question, ask. If you have a good team, they'll want you to ask questions. When I was an intern, one of the managers I had, I would always go into, I hate to bother you, but I have a question. I probably did that. I probably started out questions like that maybe a dozen times, and she goes, one day when I walk in there, she goes, stop. Don't ever say that again. I want you to ask questions. Do not say, I hate to bother you. I want you to bother me. Think of it that way, okay? It's for the benefit of everybody involved on your team and the agency that you are at your best ability. And if that means asking questions, ask. They want you to be, working at your best so that you can help pitch in. And that's important for career growth too. In terms of ongoing education, it's a changing field out there. You know that more than anybody. Digital's huge. The way it's applied is changing. You're a little more prepared on the front end because you know that since you were in school. But be ready to ask questions like, hey, there's this conference or workshop on JavaScript coming up, right? I really want to take it. Will you pay for the fee? Ask that question. If management says, no, we're not going to pay that, that stinks, you ask the question, but that's something to keep in mind too when you're thinking about job opportunities in the future and you're in a place where maybe they aren't investing in you. So be ready to ask that. Do you have a question?
Even asking for a raise.
You have to ask to make it happen because unless they're regular reviews, they will let you go forever without giving you a raise.
That could be like the one question I don't want you to ask.
No, but if you have a good manager, they won't be opposed to you asking. There's a caveat. I would say yes, you can even ask for that. There's a couple caveats though. Don't ask frequently, because then that's a problem. 2, ask and be prepared. Because the next question is why, which means you have to show why you deserve a raise. Well, if you are doing all the work for the client that is 35% of your company's revenue and you have a great relationship with them, or they love your work, that's pretty compelling stuff, right? So I would ask, yeah, absolutely.
How do you kind of back up what you're saying? If you say I've been doing a lot of the work, then like does that put a bad light on other?
Well, so you have to be very diplomatic how you phrase that. Yeah, so this is,
Okay.
well, there could be a whole class on asking this question too.
There could be clients that are friends with a designer, and if they're working for someone else, or they decide that, hey, I might go work for someone else, and that's taking clients away from that agency because they're wanting to follow that designer, so that they could get a raise because of that reason, maybe.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways you might want to frame it, right? You can frame it as, I've done research on other job opportunities in this area. My typical job at the other agencies is getting paid this. I'm, whatever percentage short. I enjoy working here. I'd like to stay here. Is that something we can make happen? You can look at it that way. You can look at it. What you never want to do is don't say I'm doing the work. The other people aren't really doing anything. I deserve a raise.
But if you know that you're like paired up with that particular client who is like 35%, then you can definitely say like, oh, I'm working with this a lot with this client.
Absolutely. So if you can, if you are that client's team, one of their team members, you have a legitimate case for being a large part of that, the benefit of the agency as a whole from that money that's coming in. So I would absolutely think about it. And don't ask frequently, but yes, that's a question you can always ask. But just be prepared to back it up, because they will make you back it up. Nobody's going to be like, oh yeah, you want a raise? Sure. How much? Right? I wish, but no. And we touched on this. Somebody always have a rationale for what you're doing and communicate it clearly. Since you're in the job of creating something, you do have rationale for what you did. Or you should, right? Color selection, layout, placement, imagery, you name it. There should be some thought, quite a bit of thought as to why you did what you did. Sometimes it's as simple as this color, highlighted this text more, or something simple like that. It doesn't need to be like, you don't need to get all philosophical about it, but it can be. You just need to have the rationale. And then when an account person, because the account person is going to have to explain this to the client. If you can't explain it to the account person definitely can't explain it to the client. So, a good project, or next time we're working on a project, good thing to do is maybe think about, okay, go through the process. If I had to explain this to somebody, why I'm doing this the way I'm doing it, just think about how would I explain that, or what would that sound like. Doesn't need to be anything crazy, any crazy description, but the account side will generally be good at framing why something was created the way it is. But anything you can add to that is invaluable to the account side. Because what you want to show is not only we're putting our best foot forward, this is an expert way of doing this, and this is what we would suggest, based off of our years of experience and ability. But in order to do that, you need to explain why you're doing it the way you're doing it. And so we've talked about this a little bit, about the unique challenges of each department. This is where it's important to empathize with others, and that's kind of a really broad communication thing to say, but knowing that there's going to be mistakes, we're all human. Hopefully it's not a big mistake, but even if it is, stuff happens. Empathizing with the account person that just got that nasty call, or the production person that really should have forgot to add a spec that was pretty crucial to the project, to the designer next to you that just made a mistake. Things happen, they're going to happen. Thinking that through, not getting aggressive or passive aggressive, none of the high school stuff within an agency setting is important. Without empathy, relationships break down pretty quickly, and as soon as you have broken relationships, that can mean, and that leads to a hurting the business. Management will likely have to make a decision, well, how are we going to fix that? And generally that means one of those two people won't be there. Nobody likes to go through that process. Sometimes both those people won't be there. Nobody likes to go through that process. Empathize with others. Communicate pride and confidence through your work. Can't stress this enough. Realize, and we talked about this again, I mean, you are sharp. You asked all these questions before I even presented this, these pointers. Think of it, anything you put forward represents you, represents your agency, so make sure it's proof, make sure it's up to your standards, and that you are happy with it, that you can live with it as that representing you. A relationship can deteriorate quickly between, say, an account person and a designer when trust is lost. And often that's because somebody stopped caring. It could be the account person, could be the designer. But it's easy to tell when somebody does not care. And extremely easy in an agency setting, especially with designers or account people when they're writing, because the quality of work goes down. Or they're missing things that, I mean, interns shouldn't miss, which as soon as that trust is broken, it's really hard to repair. So keep that in mind going forward, and that's just good practice, whether you're a freelancer and work by yourself with a number of clients, or you work in a larger organization. These are going to happen in any workplace environment, and so making sure that you understand the importance of communication and where other people are coming from and what you need to communicate effectively or to work effectively is extremely important. So keep that in mind as you go forward.